Good morning, guys. Happy St. Patty's Day. It's March 17th, 2019. And today we're going to pick up again on Chapter 2, Blake Snyder's categories. We've been over Monster in the House, we've been over Golden Fleece, and we've been over Golden Fleece and Out of the Bottle. That's what it was. Today, it's probably going to be only one more category because this is a category I admit I have a lot of problems with understanding. The next category we're going to talk about after Out of the Bottle is called Dude with a Problem. Dude with a Problem. That's the phrase of category number 4. Dude with a Problem. DWAP. DWAP. Dude with a Problem. Now, let me give you the explanation of what Snyder gives, and then I'll share my thoughts. Now, he starts like this. He says, this genre is defined by the phrase ordinary dude, extraordinary circumstances. You're just an average Joe, an average Jill, minding your own business. It's a regular day like any other until, bam, something crazy happens. And it's something crazy that as a average Joe, you are not in the least prepared to solve, yet you have to dig really deep to solve this problem, to protect the husband, protect the wife, protect the children, or do something incredibly important. It's a story about an average Joe put in extreme circumstances where they have to figure it out. They have to do something extraordinary to figure out how to solve an extraordinary problem to save something of incredible value. Now, okay, that sounds okay at first, but the more I think about it, the greater an issue I have with it, because it seems really, really, really vague, where even other categories could theoretically fit in it. When you just say, because he says here, like Monster in the House, if you remember, Monster in the House had two components: a confined space, right? And then a monster that's brought about or triggered, its existence is triggered by a sin, cardinal sin committed by one of the characters, and the monster comes back as a vengeful angel, killing those who committed the sin and sparing those. Okay, those are the two components, right? In the same way, like Monster in the House, this genre also has two very simple working parts. Number one, a dude, meaning an average guy or gal like ourselves. And number two, a problem. Something that this average guy must dig deep inside himself to conquer. Again, in my opinion, there has to be, I have to spend a lot of time in thinking about it and figuring out where additional lines are, because it seems like you can fit anything in it. Here are some of the examples that Snyder gives as examples of dude with a problem. First of all, the first one I think is a really great one. Just an average day beginning until something extraordinary happens. Like, for example, the building where my wife works is taken over by terrorists. That's Die Hard. Ordinary guy, wife at an office job, or a Christmas party until the office is taken over. I forget why. I forget what the terrorist's MO is, but yeah, okay. Ordinary guy, ordinary day, wife, ordinary party until something crazy happens, and all of a sudden he has to rescue his wife. Okay, that's fine. Next one, Schindler's List. Everything is fine until one day your Jewish friends all of a sudden get taken away by Nazis. I have to watch that film again, but reducing it to simply, it feels like it's a reduction. It feels like it's missing out big chunks of the story. Maybe I'm wrong. I have to watch it again, but okay. Next one. A robot from the future comes and tells me he's here to kill me and my unborn child. The Terminator. Okay. This is obviously Terminator 1, where, I'm so sorry, I forget the name of the actress, but a Model T, what is it? T1, I forget whatever. One robot from the future comes to protect the wife, ends up impregnating her, and they're escaping this other robot from the future that wants to kill her because the son is a central figure in the revolution that kills the robots in the future. So, is that an average everyday woman? Oh wow, actually it is. She works in a diner, if I remember. And all of a sudden, this guy comes out of nowhere saying, I have to protect you, something's going to kill you. Okay, I guess that does fit. I have to watch his movies again. That's another thing. I haven't watched movies in a long time, and once Blake Snyder, this is changing the subject again, but once Blake Snyder is like worked through, there's going to be weekly films watching here where there's an analysis done and a figuring of the plot and a labeling of the movie under which category, just to exercise this film story categorization thinking muscle, so. But Terminator 1, okay, I can live with that. Now, okay, here's the one that I have a little bit of a problem with. Not a problem, but it just doesn't feel right. Okay, here we go. The ship in which we are traveling hits an iceberg and begins to sink without enough lifeboats for everybody on board. Okay, the problem that I have with this movie is that when someone talks about Titanic, sure, they bring up the iceberg, but it's second, or rather, the importance of the iceberg, at least when people talk about it, is not that it poses a threat to the lives of everybody on the boat, although it does, is that it is what puts a threat and it's what puts a threat in the romance between Jack and Rose. To me, when I think of Titanic, I think of Lady and the Tramp romance on a boat that is tragic because the boat sinks and it kills one of the lovers. So, first of all, since it's a dude with the problem, you have to ask yourself, who's the dude with the problem? Who's the person in extraordinary circumstance? If the extraordinary circumstance is that the ship hits the iceberg, it follows that the dude in this case could be either Jack or Jill. That was a coincidence that Jack is actually named Jack. Jack or Rose, sorry. Because they're both people, and they both have terrible personal problems, and they're both in a situation on a boat getting sunk. So which one's the main character? Is it Jack or is it Rose? I don't know. From this category, doesn't tell me. And if we follow the rules, it's saying, okay, here's an average everyday Joe. Okay, so Jack is the average everyday Joe, quote unquote, because he's a poor boy. That makes him at least more average than Rose, who's an aristocrat. Well, she's an aristocrat on a down spiral to poverty because that's why she's marrying this douchebag, because her mom is poor and all the money's gone and whatever. Jack is the more normal one. In the extraordinary circumstance, first of all, the extraordinary circumstance that he's in is that he's on the boat going to America at all. That's a pretty extraordinary circumstance. He wins a pair of tickets with his friend from playing poker from some people. So that's already an extraordinary circumstance. And then the extraordinary circumstance is not only does he fall in love with a rich girl, but she falls in love with him. That's extraordinary too. And then the iceberg comes. And so now Jack has to dig deep in order to solve this problem. I guess the problem is that the problem does not seem the problem in this story of the Titanic does not seem See, I'm thinking this through as I'm making this video, so forgive me if this is frustrating, but it would seem, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me like the problem of whatever it is should be specifically shaped to attack the weaknesses of the protagonist. Maybe not. Well, anywho, this clearly shows about the kind of struggle that I'm going with this category. Here's a dude, here's a problem, dude with a problem. It seems like it lends itself too easily to inappropriate application. Like, for example, The Wizard of Oz. The fact that Dorothy wakes up in Oz is pretty extraordinary. Alice in Wonderland, she's a normal girl. She wakes up and she sees a rabbit and down of what that seems pretty extraordinary. So from the get-go, just from the description of a normal girl in Oz, does that all of a sudden make it dude with a problem? Obviously not. It's a golden fleece because it's a journey story. Now, it seems like, oh gosh, there's a lot to think about. Harry Potter is another great example. Young kid, I don't know if average quite describes him. Is he an orphan? I mean, he's living with his aunt. That's family. So I don't know if that's orphan. Anyways, he's unloved. You know, reminiscence of a child called It. You know, they just hate him. He lives in a closet, miserable, and he thinks he's doomed to. And the funny thing is that Harry, anyways, he finds out he's a wizard. Oh my God! Hagrid comes in. I forget, what does he do to his... Oh yeah, gives his cousin Pigtail and then introduces him to this wizardy world. And where not only is Harry introduced to a wizardy world, but he finds out that he's actually the most famous wizard of all. And that he's actually the most special person ever. And so it's a complete 180. So is that average everyday guy extraordinary circumstances? I don't know. And not only that, Mr. What's his name? Squirrel? I forget. Is the surrogate for Voldemort, and he's actually out trying to murder Harry. I don't know. I don't know if that counts as dude with a problem, because it's a normal guy in extraordinary circumstances, but seems to me like there ought to be further questions to be asked in order to get down as to whether or not it is, and I don't know what those questions are. I'm still thinking about it. So okay, let's get back to here. He gives another example of a film. This is the movie that I haven't seen. A movie with Kurt Russell called Breakdown. Never seen this one. I would like to. It says, in Breakdown, Kurt has no superpowers. He has no skills. He has no police training. Nada. Nothing. But he shares with Die Hard the same domestic agenda all average guys understands. Quote, save the wife. Whether our hero is skilled or not, it's the relative size of the challenge that makes these stories work. Okay, so let's pay attention to that one. Whether the hero is skilled or not. If it's a skilled hero, could he still be an average Joe? Is an average Joe skilled? So, I mean, skilled in what? Like in average Joe, in what respect? Like what if it was a movie where the main character was a culinary chef? If is there such thing as an average Joe chef? What about like an average Joe chef? What's an extraordinary circumstance that could happen to a chef? Like, let's say a robot from the future comes and has to protect him from his... I don't know, something ridiculous. Or let's say somebody in... Okay, let's say somebody in the military. Somebody in the military who's trained. Okay, they have skills. Now all of a sudden it's an average every day in the army, but then they run into aliens or something. Is that an average dude in an extraordinary circumstance? I don't know. But he says, skilled or not, the relative size of the challenge makes these stories work. The relative size of the challenge. Fair enough. Like, okay, here's an example that I'm thinking of. Let's think of the movie with Colin Farrell, great movie, The King's Speech. The King's Speech. The King's Speech, as some of you have seen, is about a king who has a stutter, who can't speak well, but he's in this crazy position of there's war going on between England and Germany, and the king is in this position where, first of all, he has to be king because his father dies, and secondly, he has to give speeches despite his stutter. And so the movie is more or less about a lot of things, but one of them, it's about him figuring out how to manage his speech. It's a lot more interesting than that, I promise you, but I'm narrowing down on this problem for one reason. It's because you have a protagonist who has a particular problem, a particular shortcoming, right? Who is put in a position that exactly attacks him with respect to his weakness. That makes the challenge, that makes the relative size of the challenge pretty big. Now, does that count as dude with a problem? Does it? King Edward, or King Henry, I forget his name, is not an everyday dude. He's not. But he seems like, I don't know, in some respect, relative to the other politicians that's around him, relative to his other family members, he's relatively normal. You know, again, normal relative to the environment that he's in. He's not normal to me, but he's normal relative to everybody. And his problems, the problems that he has, you know, accepting responsibility of being king despite it not being his wish. I forget that part. And yeah, having personal lackings that has to be overcome in order to fulfill his responsibility. although we cannot relate to being a king and having to give a speech during a time of war, a lot of us can relate to being put in positions of having to do shit that not only are we not skilled to do, but we actually have problems that make it harder. So it's like, I can identify with it, but there's some parts I can't. Is he a normal dude? Is he not? In the extraordinary circumstances, him having to give a speech, right, to protect or represent his country in a time of need. So it's not protect the wife. It's kind of like be the king that your country needs. It kind of reminds me of Lion King, you know, Simba. You got to be the king that you need to rescue Pride Rock, right? So it's like, fuck, I don't know if that counts. It's because to me it feels at this point that the rules are too vague. I think I haven't thought about it enough. Let me know what you think in the comments. Dude with the problem is the one that I really truly wrestle with a lot. One more example. Oh, well, let's just read off this last paragraph and then we'll move on. So, the relative size of the challenge, that makes these stories work. And the one rule of thumb is the badder the bad guy, the greater the heroics. The badder the bad guy, the greater the heroics. Okay. But then again, what does that have to do with the Titanic? The badder the bad guy? Does the Titanic really have a bad guy? I mean, there's the guy that Rose is betrothed with, but he's not really a quote-unquote villain, is he? Well, I mean, he's jealous and he tries to get in the way, but the problem, in Snyder's own words, is the iceberg. So it's like, the badder the situation, the greater the heroics. If the source of the evil is a villain, then I suppose that sentence makes sense. But in this case, I don't know. I have to throw up my hands here. Okay, so make the bad guy as bad as possible always. For the bigger the problem, the greater the odds for the dude to overcome. Okay. Okay. And no matter who the bad guy is, the dude triumphs from his willingness to use his individuality to outsmart the far more powerful forces aligned against him. Now, that's something in common that like Aladdin has, right? In the very end, when Jafar has genie and is a evil wizard, and Aladdin is clearly outclassed and outmatched, there's that very brief dialogue between him and Genie when they're in the palace, and Aladdin sneaks in, right? Genie comes to him and he says, I work for Crazy Psychopath now. What are you gonna do? And Aladdin says, remember, I'm a street rat. I'll improvise. And so Aladdin, that very quality of him that he felt was lacking, that he felt that he needed to rectify through a wish, actually becomes the source of his power, because through his wits, not through his value of being a prince, but through his wits, his street rat wits, he outsmarts Jafar and gets him to make a wish that ultimately undoes him, right? So it's like, no, I'm sorry. I guess that might not have been relevant. I mean, because again, Titanic, I fail to see how Jack or Rose, depending on who the main character is. I think it's Jack because he's the more normal of the two, but I fail to see how he uses his wits or his individuality to outsmart either the villain or the, because you remember when he gets locked under that thing in the boat, he gets locked behind a pipe with cuffs. It's Rose that sets him free with an axe, right? He doesn't use his wits to get out of it. So it's like, I don't know. It's like these rules don't seem to be. Maybe I'm missing something, but his willingness to use his individuality to outsmart the far more powerful forces aligned against him. Pretty difficult stuff. Difficult with respect to trying to get a grip on it, because a lot of it seems pretty liquid and fluid, and it's not, I don't know. So Dude with the Problem is one that I'm currently struggling with. If there's any advice you guys have, any films that you think are examples of, or great examples of films that are not examples of Dude with a Problem, just to get both sides of the idea so we can get a full, outline of what's going on, that would be appreciated. Comments, questions below. Anything you guys got to say, let me know, and I'll see you in the next video. We'll just wrap it up from here. I had a lot to say about this one, and we'll pick up the next video on the next category number 5. Almost halfway there. All right, see you guys. Bye.